The inspiration for the whole art style, the art direction, is of course the Greek-Roman culture. They had these really tall buildings, these tall monuments back in the day, and we used those. They are also used in a lot of different games, a lot of different movies, and books and illustrations, whatever. Really a central theme that has been used a lot. We use the bigger scaled stuff. We are going to take inspiration from the huge temples that we see that are still remnants in Greece. You can still visit some of these temples, or the remnants rather of these temples. But also the smaller stuff, like the normal people where they live, the small hovels. We also look into what was the architecture in that time. What did people use as objects?
They already had the idea of it being set during the Etruscan era. Which isn't much known about it, which was good for us because we didn't want to be bound by historical accuracy. It was nice to kind of have that freedom of not really being set in an exact date in history. So we could mix up some influences of different styles like Roman, Etruscan and Greek art styles. We really wanted like the early primitive bronze works and then the craft works, as well as the architecture to make it really feel like a solid and old forgotten world.
We chose for a semi-realistic art style so that the player can associate with what he's seeing around him, since VR is very immersive.
Our main inspiration for the game was the art style of Gustave Doré, especially the black and white and the high contrast lighting were big influences on our game that we used.
The Gustave Doré etches really illustrated the high contrast lighting and the visual style that we wanted to achieve.
As well as the theatrical placement of objects, we really wanted to give you the sense of being in an art piece or on a theater, and not so much as being in the open world where stuff is randomly placed. So we have a black and white art style, but we felt that we could use a little bit more, something else that was missing. And we opted to go for the color gold as a sort of a detail color to go in there to really add that last bit to the art style. It also helps in terms of gameplay because if you see something gold, people want to touch it and interact with it. So in the beginning, during first tests, it was kind of confusing for people because some objects were gold and some weren't, and they wanted to grab both and it didn't work. So we also made the decision gameplay-wise so that everything that is gold you can also interact with to make it clear to the player.
The creative process at Mantis always starts with the story. The story is the backbone of everything. That's where everything begins, and that is what spawns the ideas. The whole lot of ideas. There's always a lot of ideas that people have, and then we start looking into these ideas, iterating on them. So we start talking to each other, maybe make a prototype, and then start evolving that in the idea into the next level. But you have a limited budget, you have a limited time, you have a limited scope. You need to release the game one day. So what you do is start a process of elimination, basically. Start picking the ideas that make sense, group them all together, and make sure that you have one big product at the end. And the ideas that stay on the table might be useful for a later game, maybe another iteration of the game, maybe a next chapter, who knows. But I guess that's indie game development.
So how do we start making the levels in Journey for Elysium? We first start with like really just primitive shapes, and we just put that in level and test it out to see if it flows well and you can navigate everything nicely. We call it a gray box, and once that starts feeling nice, we do some adjustments and take some feedback on the people playing it. And then after a while, we see that it's okay, it's nice to play, and then we start filling it up with objects and atmosphere and different sort of skies and lighting. And every level, we wanted to give every level like a unique theme, which is a bit more difficult in our game because it's a black and white theme. So color is already harder to, which is usually like the primary way of giving like an atmosphere or a unique feeling to a level. So we really wanted to take another approach at that and work with fog and sound and ambience and sort of high contrast and low contrast fog and lighting, so that every piece still feels unique. Every area that you visit has like some unique feel to it.
To make the game come to life, we use animations inside of the game. Animations can be quite complex, or it can also be quite simple. If they're more complex, like a human, we often let the artist make the animations, but if they're simpler, often a programmer can make them as well. So for example, a wooden bridge falling down is quite simple to animate, versus a character running, that's more organic, so an artist needs to make it. Now, once the animation has been made, we have to make sure that the animation gets triggered at the right point in time. So for example, when the player wants to move his character forward and he presses the button or uses the controllers in VR, the characters need to start moving, so it needs to go from an idle animation to a walking animation. And making sure that this goes smooth and as fast as possible makes a game feel good.
While creating props for Journey for Elysium, we have a lot of freedom. We of course have a certain art style, which everyone respects, but we have all sorts of people who are strong at what they're doing. And it's awesome because we can learn a whole lot from each other. Everyone has his strengths and we share all that knowledge. The stylized props really challenge each artist to get the best out of their creative freedom. And I really love all the creativity that goes into this game.